Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng and here are the top stories for tonight. Prabowo reshuffles Indonesian cabinet and Israel says it's accepted Trump's Gaza ceasefire proposal. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto has reshuffled his cabinet, making changes across 5 key ministries following 2 weeks of nationwide protests demanding changes to lawmakers' lavish allowances. Among the most notable shifts, Sri Mulyani is replaced by Prabaya Yudi Sadewa as finance minister. The announcement came earlier today by State Secretary Prasetyo Hadi, who said the reshuffle follows careful evaluation and consultation by the president. Indonesia's newly appointed finance minister, Prabaya, has set out an ambitious target for the nation's economy. Speaking shortly after being sworn in by Prabowo, he said achieving 8% economic growth is within reach. The cabinet reshuffle also affects the ministries of political, legal and security affairs, migrant worker protection, cooperatives, and youth and sports. Prabowo also introduced a new Hajj and Umrah ministry. Israel has accepted a Gaza ceasefire proposal backed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar says Israel is ready to accept a full deal ending the war, which would include the release of hostages and Hamas laying down its arms. Separately, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that it would strike Gaza like a mighty hurricane to force Hamas' surrender, echoing a similar warning from Trump earlier. Speaking on Sunday, the U.S. president said Israel has agreed to a new American-backed deal and urged Hamas to accept the terms or face the consequences. It remains unclear what the deal specifically entails. Hamas confirmed it has received U.S. proposals through mediators and reiterated its demand for a full Israeli withdrawal and an end to the war in exchange for releasing hostages. Throughout the 23-month conflict, U.S. officials have repeatedly said Israel has accepted ceasefire efforts, even as Israel intensifies their offensive on Gaza. Meanwhile, authorities have confirmed at least 6 people have been killed in a shooting in Jerusalem. At least 12 others were wounded, some in serious condition. Israeli police said the 2 attackers opened fire towards a bus stop at Ramot Junction on the city's northern outskirts and were neutralized shortly after. There was no immediate claim of the attack. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is stepping up pressure on Israel with a series of new measures aimed at ending the war in Gaza. The moves include a ban on Israel-bound ships and aircraft carrying weapons from using Spanish ports or airspace. His administration also issued a travel ban on individuals Sanchez says are directly involved in the genocide in Gaza.
He noted that Spain has already maintained a de facto arms export ban on Israel since 2023, but the government will now make it permanent. Madrid will also block ships transporting fuel for Israeli forces from docking at its ports and ban aircraft carrying defense material from entering Spanish airspace. Other steps include banning imports from illegal Israeli settlements, limiting consular services in occupied territories, and boosting Spain's presence in Rafah with additional troops and humanitarian projects. Spain will also increase its contribution to the United Nations Palestinian Refugees Agency by 10 million euros and commit 150 million euros in aid for Gaza in 2026.
Stay tuned for more after the break.
dalam kegelapan, mereka membawa keadilan.
Banyak operasi kita buat untuk kita tumpaskan sedikit ni. Tak settle.
Mungkin ada orang lain yang terlibat.
Dia dah muncul balik.
Kau nampak lega aku tak mati. Kau nak boleh. Aku nak kau seniara dua.
Apa ni?
Ini dia live tadi.
Lepas aku ada bangun dua. Aku bunuh. Kau tengok.
Dapatkah Tarik menyelamatkan Radwa? Tarik Rizua, His Treasure, Rabu dan Kamis, 9 malam di Astro dan Astro Go.
Welcome back. South Korea is moving to bring home about 300 workers detained in a U.S. immigration raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia last week. Officials say a deal has been reached and processing for their release is underway, with a charter plane ready to fly them back. Meanwhile, White House border czar Tom Homan has vowed to expand immigration raids on workplaces across the country.
The raid carried out by U.S. federal agents at Hyundai's car battery plant in Alabama, Georgia, saw 475 workers arrested. It is the largest single-site enforcement operation in the history of the Department of Homeland Security's investigative operations. South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun will head to the U.S. on Monday as he seeks to resolve the fallout. U.S. President Donald Trump defended the raid on Sunday, saying it is part of a strict immigration policy. He stressed that foreign investment in the U.S. is still welcome, but urged companies to respect the nation's immigration laws. The operation drew criticism in Seoul after images showed armed vehicles and shackled workers being escorted from the facility.
Donald Trump says European leaders are coming to Washington early this week to talk about ending the war in Ukraine, though the White House hasn't said who exactly will attend. The U.S. president says he also plans to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin soon and hinted at a second round of sanctions on Moscow without giving details or timeline.
Trump's announcement comes following Russia's biggest aerial attack on Ukraine so far, which killed 4 and struck the main government building in Kyiv for the first time. Russia has stepped up attacks since Trump and Putin met in Alaska last month, but Trump says he remains confident the war could be resolved soon under his administration. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Washington is seeking more EU support for secondary sanctions on countries buying Russian oil, which he says could hit Russia's economy and push Putin back to the negotiating table.
China and Russia could strengthen their bid for global leadership if U.S. President Donald Trump sidelines the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, a political analyst warns. Dr. Jia Yan-chong of the National University of Singapore, however, cautions that the grouping's ability to deliver concrete results remains uncertain.
A different story. So what you might notice from the last SCO meeting was that there was a offer by Beijing to provide development assistance for SCO members to the tune of 200 plus million US dollars. That does not fill in the gap that the US cancellation of USAID funds has created, right? And we've seen Xi also of creating a new development bank that PRC is willing to put up something like 1.5 billion US dollars. These, in terms of the sheer quantum, looks like a lot. But if you think back about 10, 12 years back ago with the Belt and Road Initiative, those numbers that were thrown out then were much, much higher. So while there is some articulation of intent, so far, if you were to look at Russia and China putting their money where their mouth is, it isn't quite there yet. And what Russia can bring to the table is fairly limited. Their resources seem to be very tied down in their invasion of Ukraine. And they, in fact, need a lot of PRC support economically with Beijing buying oil and gas, and also providing consumer and dual use equipment. So, I think we'll have to see if there's anything concrete that comes out of these sets of meetings. The pomp and circumstance, in some regard, is easy to do. The follow-up is difficult.
Chong also cautioned that it is unclear how Trump will respond to Beijing's recent efforts to use the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to bring Russia and India under one roof. He noted the Trump administration could respond in several ways, including imposing additional tariffs, tightening restrictions, or strengthening Washington's forward military presence in the Indo-Pacific.
France is heading into political uncertainty as Prime Minister François Bayrou faces a confidence vote on Monday that could cost him his position. The vote follows weeks of growing instability in President Emmanuel Macron's government. Lawmakers are expected to vote Bayrou out over disputes on economic reforms and public spending, with opposition parties gaining the momentum. France is already grappling with street protests, a slowing economy, and divisions over Macron's leadership. A government collapse could also force Macron to call for early elections, deepening uncertainty in Europe's second biggest economy. With Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba stepping down, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party is gearing up for a heated leadership contest. Former Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi announced on Monday that he will run, while Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi has also signaled his candidacy, according to party sources cited by Kyodo News.
Both Motegi and Hayashi ran in last year's leadership contest. Motegi, a veteran politician, also served as LDP policy chief. Other potential candidates include former Economic Security Minister Sanae Takaichi and Agriculture Minister Shinjiro Koizumi. Takaichi has been vocal in opposing the Bank of Japan's interest rate hikes and calling for increased spending to boost the fragile economy. If chosen, she would become Japan's first female prime minister. Koizumi, the son of former Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi, is presenting himself once again as a reformer. At just 43, he will be the youngest Japanese leader in modern history if chosen. Ishiba announced his resignation on Sunday, taking responsibility for the party's recent election defeat. The date and format of the leadership contest have yet to be decided.
The World Health Organization is urging Taliban authorities in Afghanistan to lift restrictions on female aid workers. This would allow women to travel without male guardians and provide critical care after a deadly earthquake killed over 2,200 people in the country's east.
The magnitude 6 quake on September 1st and its aftershocks injured over 3,600 people and left thousands homeless in a nation already struggling with multiple humanitarian crises. A severe shortage of female medical staff is further hampering relief, as Taliban restrictions on women in the workforce and education limit access to healthcare and trauma support. Aid cuts and damaged facilities have weakened the health system already reeling from funding cuts, leaving many without adequate treatment. The United Nations said some 11,600 pregnant women were also affected, in a country with one of the highest maternal mortality rates in Asia.
China has ramped up its foreign direct investment in Malaysia, emerging as a key player in manufacturing, services, and infrastructure. Speaking on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO Summit, Investment, Trade and Industry Minister Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz highlights efforts to draw more Chinese investments, particularly in the EV sector and other areas of growth.
We've seen strong interest in the high-tech sector. You just mentioned that sector. In fact, on Thursday, the Prime Minister will be going to our automotive high-tech valley, where it's primarily driven by investments from China. We have Geely there, a big presence of Geely. BYD is opening their factory there as well. Of course, we have Chery already in another state, and all moving into the EV technology, all adopting, because Malaysia, we are very large player in the semiconductor industry, right? And that's why I mentioned earlier that we met the Chinese Semiconductor Industry Association, where the many of the supply chain and the trade between Malaysia and China is also on semiconductor and investment. You mentioned investment. Of course, China is continue to be a big investor in Malaysia, as you mentioned just now correctly, is number 2 in terms of investment.
Zafrul added that Malaysia can provide the ecosystem for the semiconductor industry, particularly in the EV sector, to strengthen supply chain resiliency and security. He also pointed to digital and AI adoption as well as the green transition as key areas for deeper collaboration between the two countries.
That's AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalry strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head on to international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thanks for watching and good night.